Good morning. News at a glance. Today's top headline is G7 warns of severe consequences if Russia uses nuclear weapons. Zelensky rules out talks with Putin. A day after Russia rained down missiles on Ukrainian cities, group of 7 nations met virtually to hold Putin accountable for its latest actions that the United Nations denounced as war crimes. G7 leaders on Tuesday condemned Russian missile attacks in the strongest possible terms and pledged to meet Ukraine's urgent requirements for military and defense equipment. We are committed to supporting Ukraine in its winter preparedness needs, they said in a joint statement. President Zelensky has urged G7 nations to give air defense capabilities to Ukraine to stop Russia. The West has been supplying arms and ammunition to Ukraine since the war began in February. Here are the top developments in the story. First, at the G7 meet, Volodymyr Zelensky called for tough new sanctions on Moscow and again ruled out talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The chances of resolving the Russia-Ukraine war through talks appear to have faded since the day Russia annexed 15% of Ukraine and threatened the world of using nukes. Second, G7 nations condemned Russia's missile strikes on Ukrainian cities and vowed to firmly stand with Kyiv for as long as it takes. The G7 leaders also warned of severe consequences if Putin uses nuclear weapons, since the state that commits war crimes is allowed to exercise Soviet veto right in Security Council. Global architecture's been razed to the ground. Now it looks like a crater in downtown Kyiv. UN isn't a building, it's a body of governments. Follow what your government says in UNGA today. We reaffirm that any use of chemical, biological, or nuclear weapon by Russia would be met with severe consequences. We will continue to provide financial, humanitarian, military, diplomatic, and legal support and will stand firmly with Ukraine for as long as it takes, G7 said in a statement. Third, the United Nations branded the location and timing of the Russian strikes as shocking and noted that direct strikes on civilians amount to a war crime. The location and timing of the strikes when people were commuting to work and taking children to school is particularly shocking. Intentionally directing attacks against civilians and civilian objects, that is, objects which are not military objectives, amounts to a war crime, a spokeswoman for the UN Human Rights Office said on Tuesday. The dashcam captures the moment when a Russian missile hits one of the electrical facilities in the city of Lvov. Most of the city doesn't still have electricity to this moment. Fourth, according to Ukraine, 19 people were killed and over 100 injured in Russian blaze that damaged infrastructure and knocked out power and gas. At least 12 energy facilities were damaged in 8 regions. Fifth, the situation is even grimmer in towns recaptured by Ukrainian army. Bodies of 55 people, including a 1-year-old baby, were exhumed from a mass grave in a town in Donetsk region. In a crematory in Lyman town, authorities found around 110 graves. Ukraine has accused Russia of torture and execution of innocent civilians, a claim that Moscow has systematically denied since the early days of war. Sixth, Russian President Vladimir Putin has reiterated that missile strikes were in retaliation for a strike on a key bridge linking Russia with occupied Crimea, for which he blamed Ukraine. Seventh, US President Joe Biden has called Vladimir Putin a normally rational actor who badly misjudged Russia's prospects of occupying Ukraine. I think he is a rational actor who has miscalculated significantly, Biden told CNN after Moscow's shelling of civilian targets across its neighbor marked an escalation in the 7-month conflict. 8th, India has also expressed concern at the escalation of the conflict in Ukraine, including targeting of infrastructure and deaths of civilians. Yet, we reiterate that escalation of hostilities is in no one's interest. We urge an immediate cessation of hostilities and the urgent return to the path of diplomacy and dialogue. India stands ready to support all such efforts aimed at de-escalation, the External Ministry has said in response to Russian missile attacks on Ukraine. Ninth, the deadly strikes on the cities of Kyiv, Lviv, Kharkiv, Dnipro and Zaporizhia was some of the worst Ukraine has seen for months. A moment when a Russian missile exploded next to the bicycle and pedestrian bridge in central Kyiv, which has only opened in 2019. This is civilian infrastructure. There are no military locations nearby. The very first Russian missile strikes on Ukraine's capital. This is how the morning started in Kyiv. More explosions followed. We call on Intel community to act one voice. Impose more sanctions. Recognize Russia as terrorist state. Must be punished now. Last week, Vladimir Putin signed accession treaties, formalizing the takeover of 4 regions in war-torn Ukraine: Kherson, Zaporizhia, Luhansk and Donetsk. At the ceremony held in Moscow, Putin loudly proclaimed that they would defend their land. That's all for today. Thank you. Wish you all a good day.